So welcome to Mindset Monday. I am going to talk today about, let's see if we've got anything in the chat. Ooh, yes, love it. Thank you, Beck. I look great with the wall color. I know, I feel like the white was just so, I really didn't like it. It wasn't even white, it was actually gray. But with camera lighting, whatever, I guess it just looked it that way. Stacy, I find it like a pep talk and good way to start the week. It's inspiring. Fantastic. Tori is saying the lack and scarcity was extremely helpful for me. I have listened to it a number of times. Cool. I would love to have you talk about hurdles going from full-time work and painting only as a hobby to transitioning to painting full-time and gradually morphing away from original work. And gradually morphing, I know you meant morphing and not morphine, but away from original work to painting. Can you, Tori, tell me a little bit, if you can like elaborate a little bit on that when you say gradually morphing away from original work to painting? What do you mean by that? Do you mean like, yeah, you tell me what you mean. I'd love to hear more about that from you, Tori. Okay. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. I'm getting more and more excited about these. Like I used to, honestly, it was kind of scary for me, not kind of, it was quite scary for me to go live. And like I was, because I'm like, oh, I say and ah and like all the time. And now I'm just like, whatever. I'm glad you're all here and I'm glad it's helpful to you. So today what I have prepared to talk with you today, for those of you who are just coming on, I asked people to put into the chat what it is they would like me to cover. If there's anything that I've missed that you're interested in hearing me talk about, put that. If you're here live in the community, drop that in the comments. If you're not here live, or you're listening to this on Facebook, or now we're streaming on YouTube, so fancy, or you're on YouTube, just go ahead and drop it in the comments there. I would love to hear that from you. And as well, so the two questions, one or both you can answer is, what would you like me to cover? What have we missed here in Mindset Monday that you would like me to cover? And what has been a big takeaway for you in terms of past Mindset Mondays, if you've been following along as we've been doing this. Because again, I really love hearing from you, and I love kind of knowing what it is that would be helpful to cover for you. Today, we're going to talk about patience. Not my favorite thing. I said something the other day to a friend of mine about, yeah, I'm writing this podcast episode. I'm writing this presentation on patience. And she just kind of laughed and she's like, okay, because you really need that. Because I guess I'm a little bit impatient. Who knew? Except for me. But patience in your studio. So here's the thoughts that I've been having about patience. So there's the kind of raw feeling of being impatient. Like, I really want this to happen faster than it is. And I don't think you need any help from me identifying what that feels like for you, like when you're feeling impatient. But I noticed there's a couple other areas where if you are able to cultivate patience in your studio, that there are just so many massive benefits to it. So I wanted to kind of start off with the definition of patience, which it is, because I was thinking to myself, do I define patience from something that I perceived when I was a kid, which was basically be quiet, don't complain, sit still. It was something along those lines. And then I took that into my adult life, and it became more like, okay, just don't complain, just put your head down, keep working, just don't complain. Right. So just wait, and don't complain. That's kind of how I interpreted being patient. And then I went and looked it up in the dictionary, because I don't know, like we all think we know what patience means. And the dictionary says it is the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, problems, or suffering without becoming annoyed or anxious, right? Which is a very nice way of saying sit still, stop complaining, right? Like don't be anxious, don't be annoyed by whatever it is that you're waiting. And so I sat down and I was really thinking like, okay, that's not quite how I am interpreting the that's not how I interpret having patience with yourself as an artist and with yourself, with where you are in your art career. I think it's not just about waiting, because waiting to me feels really passive. And it's not the absence of being annoyed or anxious. To me, what I have found has been insanely helpful, and was for one of my biggest aha moments in the studio was this kind of like, it's not enough to just not feel anxious, frustrated, or stressed, or like this isn't happening fast enough, or like those thoughts that start to sneak in after a while of like, I should be doing better, blah 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 blah, right? To me, it's about cultivating a calmness and a clarity, and like to be physically relaxed, like to actively relax yourself while you're painting, so that you're open to everything that you need to bring into the studio with you. So I kind of came up with this, that patience is about actively staying calm and clear as you take action. So it's not just a passive thing where you're waiting around. As you take action and you allow the inevitable consequences of your actions to happen, to occur, right? So I'm going to break that down because I think it's really important. And I think like the details really matter, because so much of our experience in the studio changes with these really subtle shifts where you really just start to dial things in. So like I said, not feeling anxious or annoyed isn't the same as actively cultivating these feelings of calmness and being grounded and relaxing into the present moment while you're creating. So it is an awareness and an active cultivation of the feelings that will help you. It's not just the absence of the anxious or the annoyed or whatever it is that pops up for you when you're feeling impatient in the studio. It's creating a sense of calm and ease and being relaxed in the present moment, rather than anxiously rushing through what's currently happening, either in the individual painting that you're working on now, or like trying to rush through where you're at in your creative career. So for I think a really good example of that, like the best example I feel like that most people are like, oh yeah, totally, is the feeling of wanting to, like, so if you're at a place where you're either not selling paintings or you're not selling enough paintings to support you financially, we want to really, like, the impulse is to just like, can we just get to the other side where all of that is happening? And when you bring that kind of energy of where I'm at right now isn't good enough, and where I'm at right now is negative, then you're allowing those anxious, annoyed, you can fill in your own blanks of anxious and annoyed doesn't resonate with you, but I'm just going with those two. And I'm sure that there's more. And I know that I would have more if I really like sat down and wrote a list. But if you bring those feelings with you into the work that you need to do in order to create your best work, to show your work, and then to sell your work. And if, as you're taking action for all three of those things, the feelings that you have are as this, like, it's not happening fast enough, I'm anxious, I'm frustrated, I'm annoyed, blah, blah, all those things, then the results that you get are going to reflect those feelings that you have. Those feelings tend to shut down our creative thinking. And what we want is to open our creative thinking, whether we're talking about like the creative act of painting, or we're talking about creating a place where you can show your work, or creating sales for yourself. Like, those are also things that you create, and they are also things that I think arguably are within the creative process of artists. That is a whole podcast episode in and of itself, that thought process of, I create the shows, I create myself being in the gallery, I create my own sales. I don't just like wait for them to happen. I'll put that on the list. But when you are patient with yourself and your art, there is this stillness of the mind. But there's also a lot of action happening. So like I said, you're not waiting, you're not like sitting still. As you cultivate this capacity to be calm and at ease and relaxed and open to the present moment and fully focused on whatever it is that you're doing, as you cultivate that capacity, you create the space that you need to create the outcomes that you want. And what I think, we talk about this in Growth Studio all the time. Can I hear an amen from my Growth Studio people? I see some of you on here. When you do all of that, you create the space to access your own voice. And your own voice is I know a lot of you are concerned with how to find my voice in my painting, but your voice is also, I think, that deep inner knowledge, that wisdom that you have deep inside of you, that is yours, where you are not second guessing yourself. You are trusting yourself, all of that. Like, people in Growth Studio always, thank you, Kitty, for the amen. People in Growth Studio are always kind of like laughing at me a little bit, because I just know. And some of you who are watching this, I've never met you, right? But I know you are way smarter than you think you are, because so many of us we think the answers are outside of us. So when you cultivate this patience, this ability to be patient and really like treat that as a skill that you are constantly working on and constantly developing and refining and honing, in the same way that you work on your drawing skills, where you really get to know how to draw a line and the thousands of different ways that you can draw a line, and all of the different like pressure points and materials and paper and graphite or charcoal. Like, there's so many different ways to draw a line. I think that there's also so many different ways to really practice this idea of patience, and what it brings to you. So the waiting and not complaining part of the traditional definition of patience, I think, is a little bit problematic, because to me, there is that stillness and calmness and just groundedness in the brain, but you're doing stuff, you're active, you're taking massive action towards your goals. And whether that is to increase your skill set or show your work or sell your work or whatever it is, you're taking massive actions towards those things. So you're not waiting, you're not still, you're not paused. The patience that I'm talking about is not just about waiting, it's filled with that calm, focused action. And I think that distinction is really important. Which brings me to the last part of my definition of patience, which is allowing the inevitable consequences of your actions to happen. Okay. So small, like all of you all who've been here in Mindset Monday a few times, you've heard it. You can all probably almost recite it with me, right? That small steps lead to huge results. The baby steps that you take, the consistent baby steps that you take are so important. And it's the small moments in our painting. It's the skills that we hone. It's the ideas that we allow to take shape, the voice that we bring into the world. All of that happens one tiny baby step at a time. So like I talked about two things that I think kind of converge in this conversation. One of them is taking responsibility for your art. And I have that here. That was episode number 266 of the podcast. If you want to refresh yourself on that later, if you want to go back and look that up, taking responsibility for your art and the domino effect that that was podcast episode 269. And it was also something that we talked about here in Mindset Monday. So this is where those two concepts meet and where patience comes into play. As you create your art, as you take the necessary steps towards getting your work out and like creating it, getting it out, showing it to people, and then selling it, as you take those steps, you take actions that then have an inevitable result. Okay. And allowing, that was the other part of my definition of patience, is allowing the inevitable consequences of your action to happen means allowing the result, regardless of whether or not it's what you wanted, regardless of whether or not it's what you intended. It is so easy to allow the result, right? To be as if we have a choice over it, right? If you take the action, there's a result, but let's pretend, right? It's really easy to allow the result, to be okay with it when it is what you intended, or it's what you wanted, or you consider it like a positive thing. So easy to be in line with that and be like, oh yeah, you can happen. I allow you. I'm good with that, right? But when it's not what you intended, that's when we want to resist and we want to fight with reality. That's where we start to think some flavor of, but this should be different than it is, right? And when that happens, what we're doing is we're trying to fight with reality. And patience is what is, I think, is essential to allowing for those things to occur, allowing for the result that you get to not be what you intended, and to be okay with that. When you have patience in that circumstance is essential to turning it around and getting the result that you wanted. So if you're busy fighting with it, and if you're busy trying to say like, this shouldn't be happening, what you're not doing is you're not problem solving. You're not looking at the results of your actions objectively and then finding your next best step. So that's where when you have that patience, when you have that calmness and that centeredness with yourself, that there's nothing wrong with you. It's just, this is an action that the outcome wasn't exactly what I thought. So the next step isn't beat yourself up. The next step isn't be mean to yourself or like throw yourself under the bus. The next step is to act with kindness towards yourself, that you thought this would work and it didn't. Okay, so now you eliminated that. What's next? What's your next best step? That's so much, like the patience that you have with yourself, that you allow yourself to, whatever label you want to put on it, to like make mistakes, have failures, whatever, like however you want to say it. I kind of do like the like, because failure is so loaded. I think it's like it's less triggering, I want to say that it's just an outcome that you didn't intend. That's it. That's all it is. And when you phrase it like that, and this is again where like words, I think words matter, words are important. The way that you think about things and the way that you talk to yourself matters. If you say I failed, that sounds horrible. And some of us have gotten to the point where we see failure as like, okay, that's no big deal. But it's still kind of, it's a pretty loaded word. So if you're not at that place where like the word failure doesn't trigger feelings of like, oh, I blew it, I did something wrong, then this idea of it being something that just didn't turn out the way you thought it would, it's just an unintended consequence, it's a result that you didn't expect, then you can just more easily slip into problem solving mode. All right. So I am going to, in the next podcast episode that I have coming up, I'm going to kind of dig in a little bit deeper into this idea and some things for you to look for in terms of some ways I think that not cultivating patience in yourself and in your artwork shows up. And I'm specifically going to talk about things that aren't quite so obvious, because I think like there's that I think we're all pretty, like I said, I think you're very smart, and so like I want to finish this painting faster than I'm finishing it won't be one of the things that I talk about. It's going to be sort of the more subtle ways that you show up, just because I think all of that, those other ways that you're kind of used to feeling like, oh, I'm just being impatient. We're going to go beyond that in the next podcast episode. But I wanted to give you this definition and give you some time to kind of chew on it and give you some time to kind of think on it, because when you practice and cultivate patience, the results that you get from that are this sort of like I mean, just the idea of going into of cultivating the skill, and I'm going to call it a skill, of going into your studio with a calm and relaxed mind. Just imagine that for a second, where it doesn't matter what happens, you always, always, always have your own back. So when you are able to cultivate patience, you will always have your own back. You will never throw yourself under the bus. Such a graphic way to describe it, but that's kind of how I think of it. Like, it's just a really awful thing that we do to ourselves when we don't have that grace and kindness for ourselves that we usually have for other people. And when you cultivate patience, and again, like, sorry, I'm going to backtrack for one quick second. One thing I do want to point out is I used to do this all the time too, where I would just, I started talking today with the kind of joking around about my friend saying like, you're a little impatient. And I used to always think of like, I used to always say that, oh, I'm just an impatient person, as if it's a character trait that I have no control over. And then I started really working on it and realizing like, no, this is a skill and you can go so deep with this. And it has such a profound impact on your experience of creating art and your experience as an artist, how you treat yourself with wherever you're at right now. And so it is a skill that you can develop. It's not as Carol Dweck would say, it's not a fixed characteristic that you can't change. It is something that you can actively learn and practice. And I do think it is something that when you're actively working on it and very much aware of it, that it has this profound impact on you. So you're more able to drop into creative flow. You're able to distinguish. One thing about when I ask artists to be patient, a lot of times they are worried that if they're too patient, then it will slow them down. When you really practice patience and really get to know what it means and how it shows up, you become a person who is aware of and able to distinguish between patience and avoidance. There's a big difference. There's a big difference between patience and procrastinating, and you will be able to pick up on it like that. And then another thing that I think is really important in terms of your creative practice is, kind of like I alluded to with being able to drop into flow. When you're patient with yourself, you become comfortable being in the present moment. So you're not spending your time in the future, which is why we get anxious. We're in the future worried about whether or not something's going to happen. And you're also not spending time in your past. You are grounded and present. And what this allows is for you to drop into flow, and it allows you to tune in and amplify your voice. And the last thing about that is just like this idea. I do want to mention this, is that when you're thinking about spending time in the future or spending time in the past, or like being right here, right now with your painting, one of the ways that I see a lot of artists drop into spending time in the past and not being present with the current thing that they're working on is when they get caught up. Like, I think normally we think of the past as like the distant past, but artists will get really caught up in like the really recent past, as in the painting that you just finished, and being caught up in that painting that you just finished, or a show that you just finished, something that you just finished yesterday, that you get so kind of wrapped up in that you can't be present with what you are creating today. And so this patience idea allows you to just kind of like, this is where I am, and this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be anywhere else. I can focus on the work that I have today, and that's the only thing that matters right now. And you can be calm and grounded. And when you can be calm and grounded in your studio, then there's so much room for all these ideas to kind of take root and grow, and you start connecting dots. There's space for all of that because of the absence of all of the other things: anxiety, frustration, all those things. All right. So that's what I have for you today to start off your week. And I'm going to slide through the comments right now. Okay, let's see what we got. Yep. Oh, Melissa, thank you. I got a lot out of your talk about the meaning of our art. I get really stuck here, and I find it hard to navigate the contemporary art world and my work and place in it. Fantastic. Mary says, I love Mindset Monday because the beginning of the week feels full of long lists of goals and responsibilities. You really help me settle my mind, focus, and get in the groove of the week. I also really love your brain neuroscience work. Thanks, Mary. Oh, Kitty, thank you. Kitty says to me, I seem very patient. Okay, so here's Tori following up. So I want to move from a full-time job affording to paint full-time, but I think I would need to take it slowly. Maybe just to start, I'd go, okay, so how to transition into that, paint on that 50, then continue to shift the days. Okay, so Tori is interested in, okay, so now I see what you're saying. Thank you, Tori, for that elaboration. So Tori's interested in shifting a conversation about shifting from painting part-time to painting full-time. Being content with where you're at. To me, being patient with myself means being content with where I'm at. I like that. Yeah, that goes right into what we talked about. I like that, Denise. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Monday and a wonderful week. And I look forward to doing more of these with you. So now they're scheduled. So now you actually know that we're doing it. I think last week there was just a few people who probably very smartly saved the link and was like, maybe I wonder if she's on. And yes, we're here. So wonderful to see everybody. Talk to you soon and have a fabulous week.